Happy holidays, everybody. It's Emily. Welcome to another Grass River micro class. So last week we started our series on tracking. So if you have not seen last week's video on coyote versus dog tracks, you might want to pause, go back and watch that one, and then come back to this video because we're going to kind of pick up right where we left off. So today I wanted to introduce you to the tracks of the other animals in the canine and feline families that we have here at Grass River. So we're going to talk red fox and gray fox, kind of contrasting them to coyote tracks, and then we're going to talk about the felines that we have here, which is pretty much just bobcats, but we'll also cover domestic house cat tracks because you might see those around your house and yards. Alright, so super quick recap on coyote tracks before we get into the fox tracks. So coyote tracks are about 2.5 inches long, kind of overall oval or egg shaped if you drew a shape around the entire track. Very symmetrical and very compact, not much negative space at all in the track, but the negative space that is there, you can easily draw an X through it. And there are claw marks in the track. So let's start with red foxes. First of all, the tracks are similar to coyote in some ways in that they are overall oval shaped and they're pretty compact and symmetrical. However, couple major differences. They're smaller, so less than 2.5 inches in length, somewhere around 2 inches is pretty average. And red foxes have really fuzzy feet, really furry feet, especially in winter, so the tracks are almost always pretty indistinct. And sometimes you can even see that fur, markings of the fur in the track itself. And then the last major difference is that red fox heel pads are differently shaped. So coyote heel pads kind of triangular, one lobe on the top, two on the bottom, but red fox heel pads tend to be almost like a horizontal bar or like a chevron shape. They've got this like raised up, almost kind of like a callus on their heel pads, and so that's what really registers in the tracks. So gray fox tracks are about the same size as red fox tracks, about 2 inches long, as opposed to coyote 2.5 inches long. And they have a lot more negative space than coyote tracks, just like the red fox tracks, but there are some important differences between the two fox species. So gray foxes have actually a more classic canine heel pad shape. They have that triangular shape with the one lobe on the top, two on the bottom, like a coyote. And then they also don't show much fur at all in their tracks, so very different than a red fox. Their feet are not nearly as furry as the red fox's feet, which makes their tracks look much more distinct and clear like a coyote's. And then one really weird thing about gray foxes is that their tracks don't always show claws, which is something that you're told when you're beginning tracking, is that members of the dog family always have claws in their tracks. Members of the cat family almost never do because cats have retractable claws and dogs don't. But in that way, gray foxes are kind of like half dog, half cat because their claws are semi-retractable. And they also do very cat-like things, like they're the only New World canine to be able to climb trees. So they've got these semi-retractable claws that don't always show up in tracks, but you should be able to identify it still as a canine track by the overall oval shape, the shape of the heel pad, and the fact that you can draw an X in the negative space. Okay, now on to cat tracks, which are my favorite. Last winter was the first time I ever came across like a perfect, super fresh bobcat track. It was actually on the Sedge Meadow Trail here, and I freaked out. It was so beautiful and exciting. So cat tracks are very different than dog tracks. So overall, the shape of cat tracks is round. If you drew a shape around the whole track, it's round as opposed to dog tracks that are sort of an elongated oval. And so cat tracks are basically as wide as they are long, or they can even be wider than they are long. And instead of the negative space showing an X like in most canine tracks, cat tracks, that it actually makes a C between all the toes and the heel pad. And like I alluded to earlier, no claws show in the track unless it's walking on, like a really slippery surface or if it's pouncing. But that's rare. And then the heel pad is very differently shaped than canine heel pads. If you get a really clear feline track, you can see that the heel pad is almost shaped like a really fat capital M. So it has 2 lobes on the top and 3 on the bottom. And the main difference really between bobcat and like house cat tracks is size. Otherwise they look very similar. So bobcats, anything greater than 1.5 inches in length or width, because again, the length and the width is generally the same. Usually about 2 inches is standard for a bobcat. House cats, anything that's like 1 inch to 1.5 inches. And then one more thing about cats that's different than dogs is that cats actually show a leading toe in their tracks. So remember how I'm always talking about coyote tracks being super symmetrical? Cat tracks aren't. So one of the middle toes will be further ahead than the other one. And that's sort of analogous to like the middle finger on a human. So you can tell which hand it is based on which finger is protruding further forward. So on cat tracks, if the toe that's the second from the left is leading, then you know that you have a right, either a right front or right hind track. But if it's the second toe from the right that's leading, you know that you have a left hind track or front track. I think I got that right. Okay, so that's all I have for tracking today. Let me know if you have questions. And again, I should say that it's rare that you get a perfect track, right? So a lot of times you have to kind of infer, always look at more than one track, because animals are strange and individual and unique, and their tracks can look weird. But generally, if you see like a line of tracks, you can get an idea for what sort of is the average or the baseline for that animal. All right, happy holidays, everybody. I'll see you next week. Bye.